quick announcement before we do our Pledge of Allegiance. Because this is a public meeting and we want everyone listening in, I know we have several people online with us, because we want everyone listening in to be able to understand the speakers tonight. We are sitting socially distanced in this room, and everyone will be wearing a mask at all times, except when speaking, so that we can make sure that people can hear us. We are the live audio stream tonight, and then we are also videotaping the meeting, which will be available online soon. All right, if we could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Much better than our Zoom meetings.
Much better.
That's a word.
But it's a struggle. Okay, we'll start with agenda approval. The only change I know of is to add an action item under F2, the base learning model resolution. Anybody else have any other changes to the agenda? Okay, can I get a motion to approve the agenda with that change? So moved. Motion by Ms. Forsberg.
Second.
Second by Mr. Strobel. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, motion passes. Moving on to some future events, please check the district calendar and resource guide or the district website for a complete list of monthly events. Tuesday, August 25th, 2020, we have a school board work session at 6 p.m. Monday, September 7th, 2020, Labor Day, all buildings are closed. Tuesday, September 15, 2020, school board regular meeting at 7 p.m. with communication to the board and administration beforehand at 6:45 p.m. Okay, moving on to our consent agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Easter,
Second.
second by Ms. Wheaton, to approve the following items of the consent agenda. Minutes of the June 9 regular school board meeting and the June 23rd school board work session. Bills paid for May 2020 in amounts totaling $3,779,107, and bills paid for June 2020 in amounts totaling $5,554,517. And personnel items. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, motion passes. Moving on to discussion reports and information items. Number 1, 2020-2021 District Operational Plan Overview and Start of School. Dr. Jeff Ronneberg and Dr. Hope Braun.
Good evening, School Board. In addition to Hope Braun, Tony, Mayor, and Queen Peterson will also be presenting this evening as we look at the start of the year. Last spring was a spring like no other. This summer has been a summer like no other as we plan for a fall that's like no other that I've been a part of. And that's what we're really here tonight, is to both provide an overview for you as a school board and the public. We've had a chance to talk about it previously this summer as a school board, but to give you an update with where we're at with planning for the fall at this time, as well as for those that are listening online as well this evening. So the first slide that we have in front of us tonight is our district operational plan. Normally at this time of year, what we do is we review our district operational plan and how that aligns to our world's best workforce. Tonight, we are not going to spend a great deal of time going through each of those projects. We reviewed this back in June with you, and we have those projects, and we're still planning on working with those projects, but the bulk of our time, I would say 95% of our time this summer has been working on looking at the state, planning in anticipation of the state release of their plan, and then now responding to that plan in the past couple of weeks. So that's really what we're going to focus on tonight is, and you remember last June, we said the primary focus would be our that strategic imperative ensuring learning through the pandemic in this 2020-21 school year. So that's what we're going to focus on this evening. And I just mentioned the overview of learning models. Last June or May, the state said that each school district in the state should really plan for three different models. And you may remember that we also walked you through, in June, we looked at what were the possible health scenarios that we would face this fall. And with that, we engaged in scenario planning beginning last May through June, engaged staff from throughout the district in that, and we really looked at how are we going to come up with plans to be ready when the state released their plan for the fall for an open campus, what we called open campus at the time, where school buildings are able to be open following health and safety guidance, an extended flexible learning model, which is distance learning, where school buildings are not able to be open, and then finally that modified campus schedule, we called it, which the state called hybrid. And that's where school buildings are able to be open, but with health and safety modifications that limit the number of people in the school and in the spaces within the school. And so those are some pretty significant health and safety guidelines that we need to follow both at school and then also in transporting our children to school this fall. So we were working on that throughout June, and then in July in anticipation of that recommendation that would come from the state, and it did, and it took all of the school districts in the state a little bit by surprise when Governor Walz presented the Minnesota Safe Learning Plan. And with that, they started with saying that we needed to look at that county level data, a 14-day case rate, and there's a lag in that case rate of about 2 weeks when they give us that data. But you can see on July 11th, we had a 12.41 cases per 10,000 in Anoka County. That rose on July 18th and then rose again in July 25th. And with the model, what they said is if your cases are numbers 0 to 10, you're in in-person learning. If it's 10 to 20, you'd be in-person learning for elementary and hybrid for secondary. Well, what we're looking at is we're seeing that trend data go up, and to really consider what readiness of staff and everybody else, we'll be recommending tonight a hybrid model because of seeing that increase. There's a number of other factors that we need to look at throughout the year, and we'll be doing that. And those can be found in Minnesota Safe Learning Plan. When people get this presentation, there's a link to that plan so they can see all those other factors that we need to walk through, and they're right here as well. So one of the things is we also, with those 3 models, we need to be able to respond based on what that county data is, either going to a fully distant learning model or back to an in-person learning model during the year based on what those numbers tell us. When we do that, if it's a district-wide change in models, we'd have to give a 5-day notice. So we can move on to the next. So again, I hinted at the recommendation a moment ago, and in a letter to families last week, I said we anticipate opening in the hybrid model. That's our recommendation to you tonight, is to begin the 2020-21 school year in a modified campus schedule or hybrid model. We're also providing a full-time distance learning model for those who choose it. Last week, when we sent that update saying we anticipate hybrid, we opened up a survey for parents to enroll their children in one of those 2 options. Family choice 1 was what we're calling a responsive learning model, where they're starting the year in the hybrid model, but that could flex to full-time distance learning or in person at some point during the school year based on where case rate numbers are. We're at just over 70% of our families that have returned, have filled that survey out now, and 66% of those families, or nearly 3,000 students, have selected that responsive learning model to come to school for 2 days a week. Okay? Family choice 2 was full-time distance learning, and we're at 33% of families have selected that model. So that was through as of August 10th, so today. So this is real-time data as of today. So an overview of this hybrid model, and hope Ron will be walking through the details at each grade level in a moment. But students would have a combination of learning days at school and learning days at home. The learning days at school will follow health and safety guidelines, so students will be wearing masks, social distancing in the classroom, less than 50% capacity in the classroom. So we'd be following that. So grades K and 1, we'll have those students attend school in person 5 days a week. Hope we'll walk through that model. That would be up to 15 students so that we can socially distance in the classroom. Grades 2 through 12 and Lighthouse would attend school in person 2 days a week, and then engage in extended flexible learning 3 days a week. And they'd be split in half, an A group and a B group, and that's by alphabet. So students with the last name of A to L would attend school on Monday and Thursday. Students with the last name of M to Z would be group B. They would attend on Tuesday and Friday. Wednesday would be the off day. So the off day would be that they still have interaction with teachers. Small group of teachers would have office hours. Hope we'll walk through that now. So that's what we're looking at for just the broad overview of what the modified campus schedule is. I'm going to hand that over to Hope now to walk you through each of the three different levels, K1, grades 2 to 6, and grades 7 to 12.
All right, thanks, Jeff. So we're going to start with kindergarten and first grade, talking about our modified campus or hybrid learning model. So in this model, as Jeff said, our kindergarten and first grade students will be at school 5 days a week. This will provide them with the in-person supports that they need to start and move throughout the school year successfully, including learning our technology tools and platforms. And having our youngest immersion students in school allows them to access those cueing systems that we use so strongly in immersion programming to make that language comprehensible, all building their language and opportunities in the target language of Spanish. While at school, our kindergarten and first grade students will be in a class group of up to 15 students. The student group will be assigned a teacher, and teachers will remain in primarily the same classroom space throughout the day. Teachers will be working in small teams to support learning and teaching across their small group of classrooms. This will limit the number of adults students are interacting with in person and also allows for a personalized approach to meeting student needs. Lunch will be eaten in the classroom with specific precautions taken for allergies. And recess will happen and will be scheduled by classroom group, making sure there's no more than one classroom on the equipment and limited classrooms on the fields or hard surfaces at one time to ensure physical distancing. Again, for recess, students will be expected to wash their hands immediately before going to recess and when they come back inside, and staff will be present to assist in maintaining appropriate physical distancing during recess. Face masks will not be required outside during recess. So that's our K1 modified campus or hybrid model. We're going to move on to grades 2 through 6. Our 2nd through 6th grade students will have a combination of learning at school, interactive learning with teachers at home, and on-demand learning at home. So we'll start with the 2 days of learning at school. As Jeff already mentioned, students with last names A through L will be at school on Mondays and Thursdays. Last names M through Z will be at school on Tuesdays and Fridays. We do want to note that family members with different last names will be grouped together in the same cohort. Okay. Group sizes in a traditional classroom will not exceed 15 students. Overall, group sizes in physical spaces will not exceed 50% capacity. For grades 2 through 6, students stay primarily in the same classroom space throughout the day with the same group of students and their assigned classroom teacher. Students may work with other teachers who are working together again on those small teaching teams to support learning and teaching across their small group of classrooms. Lunch, similar to what we said for K1, lunch will be eaten in classrooms. There may be times when lunch would be eaten in cafeteria at grades 2 through 6, with specifically a student's designated cohort and following protocols for maximizing physical distance and precautions for allergies. Similar to K1, recess will be scheduled by classroom group to limit numbers of students. Students will be expected to wash their hands immediately before going to recess and when they come inside. And like we just mentioned, staff will be present to assist in maintaining appropriate physical distance. Similarly, face masks will not be required outside during recess. Okay, that captures the 2 days of learning at school for grades 2 through 6. Now, next we'll talk about the 2 days of interactive learning at home for grades 2 through 6. On those days, there will be an emphasis on real-time live instruction with frequent small groups and or individual check-ins. This takes into account feedback we heard from parents and students this past spring. And while this is important for all of our students, each of our students, we did hear this more explicitly from our families whose students are enrolled in immersion programming. Instruction and interaction on those 2 days of interactive learning at home may occur with any teacher on the student's team. So teams may choose to some flexibility here in having one teacher dedicated to working with students on their team during those interactive learning days. It also allows for maximum flexibility to personalize learning and meet specific student needs. Finally, at grades 2 through 6, students will have 1 day of on-demand learning at home. This means that students will have primarily independent student work on this 1 day, which will be Wednesdays, using their learning technology resources and tools that will both reinforce the learning that has been done in person and provide a dedicated opportunity for them to dig into their interests and passions tied to the learning outcomes. We do want to note that at grades 2 through 6, some students may be at school for more than 2 days a week to receive specific targeted services and supports as determined by their individualized education program, their accommodation plan, and or their team.
I just want to mention for those listening and for those in the room that obviously just jump in with questions as we go. But those of us in the room know that the presentation does get quite detailed for some of the other questions later. So the fact that we're not all jumping in, don't worry, we'll get all those questions answered. But if you do have them in the meantime, please jump in and ask them. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to grades 7, 12.
Oh,
Yep.
I do want to clarify this because it's not a poll specifically, and this is for any teaching staff who may be tuning in, and you may want to clarify. So when we talk about the 2 days of interactive learning, that's going to be where teachers work as a team. It's kind of an impossibility for a teacher to be teaching face-to-face and providing synchronous learning to those students at home. So that they're going to have to work in teams to do that, and that's something that our hopes team has been working on this summer, and the principals have been working on to support that. But I don't want teachers thinking we have an expectation for them to do both. That would be a kind of an impossibility. That wouldn't be realistic. So I do want to clarify that because I anticipate there's a few of our teachers listening.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, now moving to grades 7 through 12, the modified campus or hybrid learning model. Our 7th through 12th grade students will have 2 days of learning at school and 3 days of learning at home. On their learning at school days, similar to grades 2 through 6 that we shared, students with last names A through L will be at school on Mondays and Thursdays. Last names M through Z will be at school on Tuesdays and Fridays, again taking into account family members with different last names being grouped together. At grades 7 through 12, students are grouped in cohorts and housed in localized areas within the building for their core courses and lunches to reduce intermingling between groups of students. Students will be anchored to the same teacher for their 4 core courses throughout the year. When we think about student schedules, students will work with teachers in their 4 core courses, English Language Arts, Science, Math, Social Studies, for 4 of the 6 periods of the day. Also acknowledging that some of our upper level high school students may not have 4 core courses.
I'm going to just explain real briefly what anchored means.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. So anchored meaning that students will have the same teacher for those core courses all year long. So they will not switch teachers for English Language Arts, Math, Science, and Social Studies at trimester breaks. All right. Students will engage in their elective courses and also receive any specific targeted services and supports in the remaining 2 periods of the day. This will happen to the greatest extent possible within their assigned cohort. When it's not possible to keep students within their cohort for elective courses, we will work through any considerations that may need to be made so students have the opportunity to engage in their elective learnings as we get more data from our families on what students' choices are. All of that, of course, maintaining health and safety guidelines. Okay. Learning spaces.
Question?
Will, oh, yep.
Does that mean that some electives may not be taught this year, or that we may have a limit on the number of electives available?
So right now, it's not in the plans to eliminate electives. So as we get more information from students and families on their choice, we have teams already working on those for whom we've heard and looking at how the cohorts would be grouped and how those electives would be scheduled. Learning spaces at 712, again, will be at 50% capacity or less to ensure physical distancing. And at 712, passing time will be restricted to limit hallway traffic, and lockers will not be available for student use. Yep, sure. At grades 9 through 12, students have been traditionally allowed to use backpacks throughout the day and carry them around. At grades 7, 8, students really utilize their lockers for that, but as we move into this year, 7th and 8th graders will be able to bring their backpacks to classes with them so they can carry their materials and keep their coats in the winter, things like that, in their bags. Okay, we're going to move for grades 7 through 12 to the at-home learning days. Okay, so to support flexibility in the time, place, and pace of learning, all courses will be built online in Schoology for 24/7 student access to course materials. This is, again, something we heard from our families from the questionnaire in April, specifically at the secondary level, having those course resources available for students to work on and revisit as needed. In those at-home learning days, students will engage in flexible learning experiences designed by the same teachers they work with at school. So students will be engaging in independent learning specifically to prepare and equip them for the deeper learning experiences they will engage in when they are at school. So an example might be, a teacher may ask students to read and develop questions to get ready for use in a Socratic seminar that they'll engage in the next time that they come in person. Okay? On those learning at home days for grades 7-12, students may also receive some live specific targeted services and supports as determined by team. And the same note as what we made for grades 2-6, some students in grades 7-12 will be at school more than 2 days a week to receive specific targeted services and supports as determined by their individual education program, accommodation plan, and or team. Okay. We'll move to the Lighthouse School and the modified campus or hybrid schedule. The Lighthouse School model closely resembles our 7-12 model in that students will have 2 days of learning at school. Again, those cohorts will be divided with the same alpha division as we've used across the system, A through L, Mondays and Thursdays, M through Z, Tuesdays and Fridays. Students will be grouped in graded clusters assigned to their teacher facilitator and will work from that teacher's room throughout the day. On learning days at home, students will continue their self-directed negotiated work plan from home on days that they are not at school that align to their inquiry projects. And just of note, some of our Lighthouse secondary students are concurrently enrolled in Spring Lake Park High School courses. Lighthouse students will continue to have the opportunity to take these courses at the high school. They will engage in that learning remotely in their Lighthouse learning space using technology to tap into the learning that is happening in person at the high school. And that is to reduce the intermingling of students and still allow for our Lighthouse students to get the learning that happens concurrently through their high school courses.
Can you touch on what we know to date or don't know related to band and choir?
Sure, yep. So as we mentioned, at this point we're planning on offering all of our electives. We are awaiting more specific guidance from the Minnesota Department of Health and the Minnesota Department of Education specific to music, band, and choir. I know we've had some questions specific to that from our families, and we're awaiting a little bit more guidance as far as what that looks and sounds like. All right, we're now going to move into talking about our learning model that is full-time, extended, flexible learning. And we want to be sure everyone is aware that full-time, extended, flexible learning or distance learning is an option for all students at all grade levels at any time. Once families make the choice for full-time, extended, flexible learning or distance learning, they will commit for at least one trimester. The ability to change back into the modified campus model or hybrid model will be dependent upon a number of factors, specifically some examples, space in buildings and transportation as a couple of examples there. If public health conditions per the decision-making framework that Dr. Ronneberg outlined earlier require all students to flex to this learning model, we will be ready to do that. And we want to make sure that everyone is aware that our approach to extended flexible learning this school year builds off the work that was done in the spring and takes into account feedback from our students, families, and teachers. We heard what worked well and where there were opportunities for growth, all with the goal of moving learning forward for our students. So we're going to just capture some of those key elements of full-time extended flexible learning. That includes both real-time, or what we sometimes refer to as synchronous or live learning, and on-demand learning, what we sometimes refer to as asynchronous. It will include both those learning formats. There will be an emphasis on daily, real-time live instruction and interaction. We'll have an emphasis on small group learning and one-to-one check-ins. There'll be a weekly overview of student work and learning experiences. That was some feedback from our parents midway through the spring that we implemented right away, and we'll continue to capitalize on that. There will be daily communication of student work expectations and interactions to strengthen those relationships between teachers and students. We will have collaborative learning opportunities that allow students to interact with each other in their learning and growth, and provide consistent and meaningful feedback on student work that moves learning forward. At this point, we're going to move on to student academic and social emotional supports, which span all of our grade levels and all of our schools. And just to start with, speaking specifically to academic supports, students who demonstrate a need for targeted instruction and intervention will continue to receive those academic support services in all of our learning models. Okay, we have a few examples listed, things such as additional time or support in reading or math, support for students who have been identified as English learners, for some high school students who need to engage in some credit recovery. Those are some examples of what we mean by targeted instruction, intervention, or targeted supports and services. For the social emotional supports, I am going to hand it off to Tony Mayer, our Director of Student Services and Special Education.
Sure, thanks, Hope. So I'm going to talk very briefly about social emotional and behavioral supports as well as special education services. Our students who receive social, emotional, and behavioral support will continue to do so in accordance with their personal learning plan or their individual education program. And special education services will flexibly shift between learning models as needed. And our students who receive center-based special education services, as well as our 18 to 21-year-old transition students, will all come to school 5 days a week for full school days, unless they are choosing the full-time distance learning option. Students will access general education minutes very similarly to the way we talked about Lighthouse students accessing concurrent classes at the high school, meaning through live streaming from general education classrooms to their center-based classroom. All families of students who receive special education services will work with one consistent case manager who will have a consistent caseload regardless of their learning model to create consistency for families. Students are going to have access to expanded counseling and social emotional support. So that's something that we did last spring. We refocused the work of some of our student services staff members to be able to provide that enhanced support. We're continuing our partnerships with community agencies to provide students and families with mental health services. And our social work services will be available for family outreach and assistance in connecting families with community resources. All right. So this whole next section here, we're going to get into significant detail and depth about our health and safety practices. But before I jump straight into that detail, you can see at a much higher level many of the mitigation strategies that we have in place. And all of these practices that you're going to hear about this evening are aligned with guidance from both the Centers for Disease Control, or the CDC, as well as the Minnesota Department of Health, MDH. I know you're all aware of the mask mandate that went into effect for indoor public spaces, and which includes schools. So all of our students and staff will be expected to wear a cloth face covering, except in the circumstances that are exempt, or for individuals where a cloth face covering is contraindicated by a medical or developmental issue. And we'll work through that process with those individuals when the needs come up. Our students and staff will be practicing excellent hand hygiene, and there are going to be routine times and situations throughout the day where individuals will be expected to wash and sanitize their hands. So some examples include, but aren't limited to, immediately upon arrival to school, before and after lunch, before and after recess, as you already heard from Cole. For this next school year, we're strongly discouraging visitors from coming to our schools. In fact, visitors won't be allowed into the school unless they've been pre-approved by a school principal. This is simply intended to be another way that we limit the number of contacts and intermingling that our students and our staff experience on a daily basis. The other mitigation strategies that are listed on this overview, cleaning, physical distancing, and health screening, are all covered in greater depth on the upcoming slides. In terms of personal protective equipment, or PPE, both the state of Minnesota and the Spring Lake Park School District will be providing PPE to our students and our staff. The state of Minnesota has promised all school districts in the state 1 cloth face mask for each teacher and K-12 student, 3 disposable face masks per student, and face shields for teachers and some support staff. And we're receiving conflicting information about when those PPE actually are going to be delivered, right? So we need to augment that with our own purchases. And we've been purchasing face masks for our staff from the very beginning of the pandemic in early March, and we plan to continue to do so. We're also purchasing additional cloth face masks for our students, and disposable masks are going to be available in the main office in the case that a student or staff member forgets their cloth face covering. All classrooms are being stocked with gloves for use during cleaning procedures and at other times if a staff member would choose to wear them. The main offices in each school and our reception area here at DSC are all being outfitted with a plexiglass barrier at the point of contact or communication with the public community. Face shields are going to be available to staff upon request for certain situations and work activities, and those have been outlined by the Department of Education, circumstances where they would be more appropriate than a cloth face covering. One quick example would be for students who are deaf or hard of hearing, or in situations where a student might receive speech and language services and they actually need to be able to see the mouth structure and tongue placement from the speech clinician. For our center-based and specialized programs where there's intensive needs, we'll have additional PPE such as aprons and smocks to provide protection when close contact is likely or required between staff and students. Our school spaces, each of our schools has a unique layout, but we're going to ensure that there's consistency in the look and the application of our physical space strategies. In fact, we've gone into classrooms, as Hope mentioned earlier this evening, to measure square footage, and we've started walking and touring each school facility with our principals, our custodians, and our administrative assistants to determine how things are going to flow in each individual school. So each physical space within our school will be maintained at 50% or less capacity, while also ensuring physical distancing of 6 or more feet is maintained and supported through seating configurations. We'll also be strategically controlling traffic flow to maximize physical distancing. So these strategies include designated doors just for entry, designated doors just for exit. Hallway spaces are either going to be one way only, or they're going to be broken in the middle, much like a roadway is, to control traffic and separate it. In places where people commonly queue up, like around sinks or the main office, there will be physical distancing stickers to mark out 6 feet. Student desks and other seating will be arranged to ensure physical distancing. Schools will be creating very specific classroom schedules, as Hope alluded to, for things like lunch, recess, restroom breaks, all for the purposes of limiting intermingling beyond the student-specific classroom group. We'll have signage posted at main entry points and at main intersections in the school, as well as other strategic locations related to all of our mitigation strategies: masking, physical distancing, hand washing, and the like. Finally, we're not going to be using drinking fountains this year. They're all going to be taped off. Instead, we're going to be using the water bottle filling stations, so students are invited to bring water bottles from home, and that's how they'll be getting their water this year. Cleaning and ventilation. We're going to be engaged in regular ongoing cleaning throughout each and every school day to enhance the cleanliness and safety of our schools. But this can't be done only with our custodial staff. This is going to require our teachers and support staff to have a direct role in cleaning. Teachers and support staff will be trained to appropriately clean highly touched surfaces like desks, chairs, counters, light switches at routine times through the day. Examples of some of those routine times would be any time a classroom group is going to change over and a new group of students is going to come in. It would be before and after lunch, and it would be at the end of the school day. And then at the end of the school day, after the teacher leaves, our evening custodians will come in behind the teachers and provide additional cleaning to each classroom that will include things like garbages, floors, and communal spaces within the school. Lastly, there have been questions about our ventilation systems in the district, and we're in a pretty enviable position compared to most districts, and that every one of our HVAC systems across the district, have been updated as recently as 2008. We have our air quality tested by an independent organization every single school year, kind of in the dead of winter, when air quality is the poorest, and every year we pass with flying colors. Additionally, our air circulation settings already exceed recommended standards, and we recently found out that all of our system and units can handle even more outside airflow, so we're likely going to be ratcheting that up to increase the circulation in our schools before school starts. Transportation, and feel free to stop me if you have any questions. Within our modified learning plan, all of our buses are going to be running at no more than 50% capacity. Both students and drivers will be wearing masks throughout the ride. Our schools will be working with transportation to develop specific seating assignments, and siblings will be allowed to sit together. Transportation will be developing specific procedures for loading and unloading the school bus in order to maximize physical distancing during those processes. Each bus is going to be disinfected, so the seats will be cleaned and disinfected after each and every route to ensure it is clean for the next group of riders. And we're going to be doing our very best to circulate as much air throughout the bus as we can by doing things like cracking windows when the weather permits and maximizing the use of the ventilation systems on the bus. As we've been talking about, our transportation has been the most challenging, most logistical piece that we've been working with. And while at this point we expect school start times to remain the same, there's some possibility that we may need to make some adjustments once we get the finalized details from our families about their transportation needs. So our commitment, though, is that we're going to let families know of any changes by August 20th. That would be the last day of communication. Our meal services, and Hope touched on some of this, but first I want you to know that meals are going to be available to all of our students regardless of the learning model that we're in or the learning model that they choose. So even if they self-select into extended flexible learning, there will be options for them to pick up meals. We're implementing a number of changes to our meal services as safety measures. First, all of our elementary meals will be eaten in classrooms, not in the cafeteria. At the 5-12 level, meals will also likely be eaten largely in the classroom with some possibility of eating in cafeterias, but really trying to minimize cohort size and intermingling if that were to occur. We will have a touch-free method of purchasing meals, and there's no longer going to be self-serve food options available to the students. That's the most difficult one for me because I really enjoyed the meals over at Spring Lake Park High School. On days when students are not scheduled to be on site, as I mentioned, they'll still be able to pick up food. Similarly, students participating in full-time EFL will also be able to pick up meals. Health screening expectations. So this is an area that we've spent considerable time reviewing guidance from the CDC and MDH, as well as talking with neighboring districts about their approach. So our recommendation for COVID-19 screening is what's called a passive self-screening that's completed at home each morning by staff and students with the assistance of their parents or guardians if necessary. So passive self-screening is being used by the vast majority of metro districts and is supported by guidance from both the CDC and the MDH. And it's interesting, in fact, when we were on a call with the Department of Health last week, they had a slide up from the CDC, and the CDC is no longer recommending universal COVID screenings at schools anymore. So that was fresh out of the gate last week. And then the CDC and MDH have both also now stated that student temperature checks are no longer recommended either. So this is pretty fluid in terms of the guidance that's coming out. We will be providing significant guidance and training to both staff and parents on how to do this COVID symptom screening efficiently and effectively every day. If upon self-screening a student or staff member has COVID-19 symptoms, they need to stay home and they need to report it to their school and or their supervisor, a school nurse in the case of a student, or a representative from the HR department in the case of the staff, would communicate with those individuals and provide additional information and resources, as well as recommending their next actions. If a student develops COVID-19 symptoms while they're at school, they're immediately going to be isolated from the rest of the school community. So as we've been doing these walkthroughs in our schools, we've been identifying a COVID isolation room that you're able to maintain supervision of the student. It's close in proximity to the nurse's office as well as the exit door, so they can be removed as quickly as possible. After that occurs, our custodians will be coming in behind them and using their disinfectant bombs, is what they call them, to clean that area out. Our procedures for exposure and illness. So anytime there's a confirmed positive case of COVID-19 within any one of our school district programs or our schools, we immediately notify the Department of Health and we follow any and all of their direction and guidance. So we already have practice with this, and we've developed relationships at the Department of Health. So in most cases, we're getting really good customer service and pretty rapid response from them, which has been encouraging. During those communications with the Department of Health, they want to know the name of the confirmed case, and they also ask if anyone has had close contact exposure to the positive case. That's interesting language. Close contact exposure is defined as being closer than 6 feet to the positive case for 15 or more consecutive minutes. So if someone has had close contact with the confirmed case, those individuals will be contacted both by the school district and the Department of Health. They then be given specific directions from the MDH related to testing and self-isolation. In the case of a student or staff that is positive for COVID-19 or has COVID symptoms, they must self-isolate for 10 days from the symptom onset or from the test date for those that were asymptomatic. And there's a large percentage of youth that are showing up asymptomatic. And they need to be fever-free without medication for at least 1 day and they need to be symptom-free of all the other COVID symptoms. Now, that 1 day of fever-free without medication is brand new guidance as of last Thursday. Previous documentation you might have seen said 3 days. This is not an error, it actually just changed 3 or 4 days ago. Anyone that's been exposed to someone with COVID-19, including siblings, other household members, they need to self-isolate for 14 days. And then notification, and we're aware that this is an area that is really high interest and concerning to parents and our staff members. Are we going to receive notification if there is a confirmed case? And again, we work directly with the Department of Health in responding to each positive case of COVID-19 within our schools and our programs. This includes following their recommendation and guidance related to notification. And we have had positive cases in the district. We followed their recommendations, and we have communicated with all the individuals that were in proximity of those cases. So we have practice at this. The notifications we send include any specific Department of Health directions and guidance on next steps that they need to take. The scope of our communication really depends on the breadth of exposure and interaction the positive case has had within a school or a program. But generally, at a minimum, at the elementary level, we'll communicate to the families of the entire classroom group to which the positive case belongs, as well as all staff that had directly worked with the positive case during the infectious period. And the infectious period is defined as the 2 days prior to symptom onset or 2 days prior to the date the student received the test if they were asymptomatic. At the secondary level, generally and at a minimum, notification would be sent to families of the entire impacted learning team, families of other students that may have been in elective classes with the positive case, and all staff that worked directly with the positive case during that infectious period.
Just before we move on, this may have been stated before, but just to clarify, for quarantining, if a student needs to stay home for 14 days or 10 days, obviously they'll still be receiving services in terms of their learning and their education.
Yes, their learning will continue. Yep.
They'll switch to
While
that
they're at home.
distance learning model while they're at home.
Yeah, the learning experience, the student work learning experiences will, if they were in person, we'll take those in person and get that to them, get that delivered to them. Remember, teachers will be working in those teams to help out with that, so, yeah.
Any other questions?
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to update you on our plans for preschool, early childhood, and childcare. So our plans for preschool are very similar to the K-1 model. We will be planning to bring our early learners into our preschool programs to start the school year with the option and the plans to move and pivot as we need to accommodate the recommendations from the county data. The early childhood programs, we are still working on a plan with that. As many of you know, our early childhood family ed programs involve our earliest learners, our youngest learners from birth to 3 typically. So our plan, our next steps are working with those parents and developing guidance with them on what would they like to see, as well as how might we support our families and our parents differently this year. Not only our early childhood families, but up through the elementary grades and even further if we can. I can tell you that last week we did reach out to our preschool families just to see what the level of comfort is in sending their preschoolers to class. We've heard from 94 of our families so far, and it's interesting, 70% are saying, yes, I'll send my child, and 30% are saying, I prefer not.
Would be same social distancing requirements and everything for preschool?
All of the health and safety measures, all of the social distancing, everything that you've seen for K-12 will be applied for early childhood as well. And then with school-age childcare, our plan right now is to provide before and after school care for those students that are in person at school. So those families that have already signed up for the before and after school care, that will still be there. And then in addition to that, during the school day for the students that are not in school, for those that are on their off day, if you will, so those students that are in school Monday, Thursday, we would be caring for them potentially on Tuesday, Friday. So childcare for Tier 1 essential workers is a part of the Executive Order 2082. So those individuals would not, there would be no cost for us to provide that care during that school day option. Right now we're looking at an 8:30 to 4:30 timeframe, which actually, when you consider when students get on buses or get off buses, instead of a typical 9 to 4 school day that we would normally do for a school release day, for example, we're extending that a little bit further to make sure that we're being able to accommodate for what that parent may normally have had or expected. So Tier 1 essential workers, which does include school district staff, would be provided at no cost during the school day for children up to age 12. And when we're operating in the modified campus schedule, the hybrid model, or the extended flexible learning schedule. For other families requiring childcare during that school day time, we do plan to open up the opportunity for them as well, and there would be a cost. We are working on a sliding fee that would hopefully accommodate our families in whatever income they may have, and to accommodate hopefully any hardships that they may have with this. So if demand for childcare exceeds the space available within the district, we are looking at options to expand. So today I toured the Emmanuel Christian Center site, which is a site located within our school district and nearby two of our elementary schools. It far exceeded my expectations as far as the space availability and how we might be able to use it from a child care standpoint.
Thank you for all that. I have a question related, but not specifically for you, and I don't know if this might be for Jeff, but for kids who are older and for whatever reason maybe want to spend their days where they're not in school in a place somewhere on our properties, is there an opportunity for that?
Yeah, so we're looking for opportunities. One of the things that we found out last year for some of the kids, distance learning that might have just been, they need some place to go where they could focus. It's difficult for them to do that at home. There's things like that. So we want to look for different opportunities. Some of those might be with off-site partners. That might be at Emmanuel, it might be NSC, but different places where some of the older students may go and things for that help. Really looking at these childcare options, as Colleen just covered. So, but more information will come from the building levels as we move forward now with those kinds of options.
For families who are interested in the childcare, or need childcare or are interested about that, I'm expecting later this week or early next week to have information ready to go, including frequently asked questions as well as the registration site. So we're moving as quickly as we can.
Okay, so now it's my turn again. After a lot of information that you're getting this evening, but athletics and activities, you may have noticed that last week the Minnesota State High School League approved some sports. One of the questions we've also had is beyond that is what about some of our activities and interest-based clubs? You've heard Will Wackman present to you as a school board in the past about the increase we've had in clubs and so on at the high school. And that's going to be reviewed this fall to see which of those that we can offer within the Minnesota Department of Health guidelines. But there's going to be more details to come on that as the communication really now will begin next week, shifting to our school principals and schools having more of that direct communication with families about this fall. State High School League, as I mentioned last week, the fall season will begin next Monday, August 17th. Those sports, girls cross country, girls tennis, girls swimming and diving, and boys and girls soccer will be the sports that will be State High School League sports this fall. In addition, volleyball and football have been postponed until spring 2021. That is a new fourth season that will be from March 15th to May 15th. And then those traditional spring sports, track and field, baseball, will be from May 15th to July 15th. So that's a shift that the State High School League has made. So the Northwest Suburban Conference will be getting more information out about shifts in schedules and things like that. That's likely to occur with those competitions this fall, because there does have to be limited schedules, limited competitions, practices that are different than in the past. So we'll be getting more information out to those participants. The next thing I wanted to hit on is as we look to fall, we're looking at some changes in our academic calendar that we're recommending to you tonight. And And that's, instead of having our first day of school being September 8th, that our first day of school would be September 10th. So all K-1 students will come to school on September 10th. All students engaged in distance learning, their first day of school would be September 10th, and all A group students would start in school, and B group students would start with their learning from home that day. The reason we're doing that is, well, before it was September 8th, is, as I said, it's just fall like no other, and there's just a lot of work that are, well, we've had people, I know that there will be cynics out there saying, you've had all summer to plan, and we have, but we also don't get all of our 900 employees, nearly 900 employees, and all of our teaching staff as a captive audience until August 31st, where we can support their planning and have them do the planning. And we really, this year, there's more planning time than ever because none of our teachers have taught in a hybrid model, and we need to allow them the time to do that. In addition, there's the health and safety training that we have to do that didn't exist in the past the way that it does this fall. And we need that time. So that's really what will be happening on the 8th and the 9th. What also will happen along with that is that we're moving 2 professional learning days from later in the year will become instructional days. So students are not going to lose instructional days. Those will be replaced later in the calendar. You can see the calendar here. This will be available for parents. But I think it's December 4th and February 11th, if I remember right, will change from days that were off in the previously. Days off for families will now become instructional days. So it'll be the same number of instructional days for students. One of the questions we get is what can families do now? So there's kind of 4 things that we wanted to highlight. First, we're asking families to make your choice if you haven't done so for this fall. We put out information last week, and like we said, over 70% of our families have made that choice. We've been reaching out to families in recent days. But those we haven't heard from will now have through the end of the day, Wednesday, August 12th, to submit their selection for the responsive learning model that would start in hybrid, or extended flexible learning or distance learning. After Wednesday, we will assign those students to the hybrid learning model. So they would start the year in the hybrid learning model. So we're doing everything we can to reach out to those families directly. We've been doing that, but again, we encourage them to do that. And I understand some wanted to wait until tonight to get a little bit more information, but we'll ask them to do that by Wednesday. Families who did complete the survey and made a selection for one of the 2 models, and after this evening, there's this information, they have a change of heart, they can make that change by emailing communications@district16.org, which goes to our esteemed Erica Tybel, and she will forward that on to the appropriate people so that we capture those requests that people make. So, and again, we ask them to do that by the end of the day, Wednesday, August 12th. That's critical because we do need to move forward with our staffing. This is going to influence, as we talked about earlier, some of the electives we can offer, things like that. So we do need to know that information so we can move our planning forward at the school level and make those adjustments as appropriate. Other thing we ask people to do, we worked really hard on the spring, and like we shared, most of our families did really well with this, but maybe once again, we want families to revisit that they have stable internet access. We were able to do that last spring, but we have students new to the district this fall. We have some that maybe had changes in their connections over the course of the summer. But if they need help with that, contacting tech support at district16.org, or in the presentation when they get this, there's a number to call. We will work with them and make sure that families have that stable internet access that's really critical to being successful with learning this fall. Another one is that said, we allow families to keep the iPads throughout the summer. What we want to do is make sure people don't find out they have an iPad that's not working on the first day of school on September 10th. So please check the status of those and then reach out to tech support now if any service is needed of those iPads so kids are ready to roll come September 10th. There's also the insurance through Campus Parent Portal that we're asking people to complete. And then finally, for students who will be coming to school in the hybrid model, some of those things is make sure they're ready to do that health self-screen for the days they're coming to school, pick out, practice wearing a face mask. I know the one that I have on tonight is like 3rd or 4th different model. I'm always trying a different one to get one that's comfortable, right? So make sure kids are picking out and practicing one that they're comfortable with. And then we're going to provide family resources in the coming weeks to help students prepare. And the next piece is just some critical dates and next steps. Tonight, obviously, this was a big one, is the forward to taking action on this recommendation this evening. Also, both the 13th and the 20th, we're going to receive additional data with updates of that county case data. So this is our first decision. We need to continue to monitor that. We don't anticipate any changes in that time, but we will be monitoring that. Beginning August 19th, families can expect to get communications from the schools on Wednesday. So we'll start the school newsletters on Wednesday, August 19th. So we really want principals focused now through the end of this week on just reaching out to families to make sure that they get that registration, their choice by the end of the day, Wednesday, and then they're going to be working on schedules and other things through the end of the week, and then they'll provide more information on schedules and things like that next week, as well as we hope by the end of next week or early the following week we'll have more information for families on bus routes and things like that. So, but we'll get more information out about that. So, and then August 20th, well, tonight the board will take action. MDE and the Safe Learning Plan requires us by August 20th, using the data provided on August 20th, to confirm our approach for fall. So we'll make that decision tonight. We'll have to confirm that approach after August 20th.
Dick, Tony, David?
Yeah. And then the final slide is that people have been asking a lot of questions in the past week. We've provided a ton of information tonight. And if people go to springlakeparkschools.org/plan2020, there's a frequently asked questions document there that I think answers almost any question that we've been asked. So people can go and dig into that and should be able to find their answer there. If they can't, they can contact their principal, that communications email, they can contact that. Eric will make sure the appropriate person gets that question so that we can get those answered. There's also an archive of family communications there. And then I just want to wrap up. As I started the presentation this evening, I shared that this has been a summer of planning like no other, for a fall like no other. And I'll be honest, it hasn't been easy for the many, many people involved. But I want to share, just getting to this point this evening has been involved a lot of work. And I'm so appreciative of the many, many staff who have been working throughout the summer. And I want to take this a moment to just acknowledge that. So in addition to the people you see here tonight, my team that you often see, we've had a whole bunch of other people involved. We've had well over 50 teachers that came in June for a number of days to help with planning. We had our school leadership teams that have been in for many, many days planning, our principals and those they work closest with. Kathy Stallnaker, I want to honor her. She's our union president and a teacher at our high school. She's been here day in and day out in the past few weeks. And she's been here both sharing her expertise as a teacher as well as working in partnership with us while advocating for the support of not just the teachers but all of our staff. And I think that that's important to recognize. I also want to acknowledge all of the many staff who have been working throughout last spring when many students were working from home. We had many staff who were working in person here involved with childcare throughout the summer. Our buildings and grounds staff, childcare staff, technology staff. We've had summer school teachers. Lucy and Carla in the front of our district services center have been working throughout the spring and summer here on site, but there's so many people. And I just want to, Spring Lake Park is an amazing learning community, and I'm confident that we're going to have a successful year moving towards our vision and engaging each of our students in meaningful, engaging learning, all while prioritizing health and safety. And that wraps up the presentation. So questions, folks?
Yeah, before we get into questions, I just want to second that and just thank everybody. I can't even imagine the amount of work that has gone into all of this for all of you. So this packet has so much great information. Thank you for putting it together. Will this presentation be added to the plan website or components of it anyway?
We will add it either tonight or tomorrow morning.
Okay.
And we definitely, the note at the bottom of the slide that says the website can be translated into multiple languages. We're going to be embedding this information so that translation capability is enabled. So that'll be by noon tomorrow, and we also plan to proactively send this out to families tomorrow.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody have questions?
Yeah, I saved them all till the end, so I've got 5, so I apologize. The first one's very easy. We've already talked about this, but I don't know if it was entirely clear in the presentation, so for anybody listening, I thought I'd ask it. Just on the overall selection of the learning model as you recommended, the hybrid K through 12, a lot of people look who watched the governor's press conference noticed that under the Anoka County infection rate, at the time of the press conference, we would be eligible, for lack of a better word, of having, I think, in-person learning for K-6 and hybrid only for 7 to 12. But the recommendation is for hybrid K through 12. So some people might be wondering about that. And just so I'm understanding it, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's really due to the lag time in the way that the state calculates the infection rate. So you're looking at the daily infection rates as they come up, and so you're able to recognize the trend for that, what will be the lagging indicator, which is what the state uses. And based on that, your thinking is that we've already increased and that we may very well increase above that 20 per 10,000 resident threshold relatively early in the school season. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, I just summarized it well. Well, we were at 15 and some percentage, and then it was 17 this past Thursday. So it's always, they're using data that's 2 weeks old. So the data that we received this past Thursday went back to July 27th. So, and then that's based on case data. So Tony, myself, and others looked at, we can see the Anoka County daily cases that have been identified, and they've continued to increase. So we anticipate that number will increase in the next two, and will likely be at 20 by the 20th. And we didn't want to adopt one model and then be making a change at that late date. So in anticipation of that trend data continuing, that's why we're making that recommendation.
Thanks. And then within the hybrid model itself, at our, I believe it was our June work session and some updates throughout the summer, it was my understanding that the goal, or at least the aspiration, was even if under the hybrid model, which I'm using the governor's terminology, but under the hybrid model, it was our goal to try to find a way to make in-class learning for K through 4 students as much as 5 days a week. And at that time, we were estimating, we thought, based on the survey, that the distance learning option would be about 22%, I believe, of our population. So now we're currently at about 33% of our student population electing e-distance learning, which should mean fewer kids in class. So I guess my question is, what were the reasons we weren't able to get 5 days a week for K through 4, for the second, third, and fourth graders, rather than just the kindergartners and first graders?
Yeah, so I appreciate the question. So we're at 70% of our families have returned. Well, we're at 33%. That's about 20% of our overall student population. We don't know what that final 30% is going to do. So if the majority of that group selected a hybrid model, we wouldn't have the ability to transport them and meet the transportation guidelines, and we'd also be looking at not being able to meet the social distancing guidelines at the school level. So one of the things I shared with a parent I spoke with earlier this evening, one of the things we'll do once the school year has gotten underway and we know better how many students we're transporting, and we've done that for some time, that's something we can always review and look at would we be able to. Our goal was we were really shooting for last week was K2, and then at some point we just said we don't know enough yet about the number of families that are choosing to provide transportation on their own. So if that looks like something we'd be able to make a modification to, that's something we bring to the board consideration for this one, even within the hybrid one.
That was my next question. Well, that was my next sub-question in this question. And then my next sub-question is, what were the reasons that we're unable to do K2 or even beyond that? Are they purely logistical reasons, or are there any other reasons for not going 5 days a week K4?
No, at this point, it was purely logistical and looking at would we be able to do that and meet the health and safety guidelines both in transportation and at the school levels. So.
Thank you. Next question. It sounded like in the presentation, I know when a couple people that have reached out to me, I think most people generally understand that this virus is relatively harmless for students. Their concern is more with teachers. address those teachers that have underlying conditions for accommodations. Is that every teacher that's reached out, or are there still issues out there with certain teachers about whether or not we're going to accommodate them? I guess I'm trying to understand if this is resolved or if there's still issues out there with some teachers.
No, I think we're in a good place right now, being able to meet the requests that different teachers have had. So that's something that we've had 3 different opportunities for teachers to share either underlying conditions that they have or other concerns that they've had. And Brian Stromberg and Chris Desertes and Human Resources have had multiple conversations with individual teachers to address those. And then that was something we looked at as recently as this afternoon to make sure that we're going to be able to address those concerns. So,
Good, that's really good news, I think. Fourth question. Distancing on the playground, particularly for elementary students. I know that's going to be an issue. A lot of parents probably heard that and cringed. I know I did. Is that part of the governor's mandate, or is that our policy that we're implementing?
it's part of the government mandate. Tony, do you want to speak on it? We've been implementing that with some of our summer school and preschool as well.
Can you clarify your question?
So
Mike?
out on the playground at recess, you mentioned that the supervisors of the recess are going to be watching for distancing, social distancing on the playground. And as a parent of elementary age students, that kind of makes me cringe. They're outside. I don't see that as a high-risk situation at all, personally speaking. And I know that there are probably many parents that think that way as well. So my question was, is that part of the governor's guidelines under the hybrid model, or is that something we are choosing to implement?
No, it continues to be part of the governor's executive order around mitigation strategies. So that physical distancing, it includes both indoor and outdoor spaces.
Okay. And then, this is for you as well, Tony, the pre-approval for guests to come to school. What does that process entail? And what about something as simple as I need to come and pick up my kid early? I mean, what kind of process are we talking about here?
Yeah, for things like pickup, even at the end of this school day, it'll likely be a call-in procedure, curbside, where we would be delivering the student out to the parent. But again, we're largely trying to minimize visitors within the school, but things like families needing to come in for an IEP meeting or other essential kinds of business, we would be allowing. And we haven't scripted the exact protocol for how we're going to vet requests, but we will have one in place.
Then the question, my final question, I guess it was, I apologize. Final question is the one I asked in the work session prior to the meeting about Spanish immersion. Like I said before, as a parent doing distance learning in the spring in an immersion setting, it was incredibly frustrating. I think there are 2 subparts to this. One would be the translation of the written materials for parents so that they can understand and better help their students, whether they're full-time distance learners or the 3 days a week distance learners. And I think that got better as the spring went along, but if you could just comment briefly on any developments on that. And then the second would be, on the other hand, a lot of parents complain about the lack of immersion in a distance setting, and any plans that you guys are taking to address that. So both of those issues, if you could just briefly comment on that.
I'll let Hope speak to that.
Sure, jump in as well. Around the time in the target language of Spanish, that aspect to it. So we heard the feedback, and that wasn't anything unique just to Spring Lake Park immersion programming. So what we are doing as we move into the fall, again, having our kindergartners and first graders here, the opportunity for them to be here every day will help with that. And as we look at those who are still choosing full-time extended flexible learning in our immersion setting, increasing the number of those live synchronous interactions will be important to get kids additional time in the target language. I wanted to note too, like I said, we know that wasn't anything specific just to Spring Lake Park around providing immersion programming in a distance learning environment. And immersion principals across Minnesota have been meeting all summer to come up with ways to address both of the questions, Michael, that you put, like how do we get the materials so parents are understanding, and how are we programming and designing student work and learning experiences for immersion in distance. In addition to that, because it was a need that had surfaced, the Association of Two-Way and Dual Language Education, there's an association, national association out there, had some learning experiences for immersion teachers in Minnesota and Wisconsin this summer, and we had a good number of our teachers attend that, and then the learning was shared with those who weren't able to attend, specific to planning for distance learning in two-way bilingual immersion and dual language programs. So those are all ways, that will get into much more specifics around it that I probably won't speak well enough to tonight, but those are things that we've done from the spring throughout the summer as we get ready to prepare great learning experiences for kids in immersion.
Yeah, I think the one key is for immersion students, but all of our elementary students, is that it's not going to be independent learning on those off days. So, and some of the principles, the creative ideas they've had is, for example, teachers might work in teams where it could be a third grade team where they have two teams of 2 teachers. They have 24 kids who are at school today. They're each working with 12, and there's 24 kids at home. But there's a third teacher that's working with the kids when they're at home, and they're working in teams that way to make sure the kids are not, it's not independent learning, but they have those synchronous learning opportunities on those off days.
Yeah, and I just want to make it clear, the teachers did the best job they could under very difficult and trying circumstances. But having said that, just a high level, do you think that the distance experience for immersion is going to be better than it was this spring?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And, you know, it's also part of our hope is those families that are selecting the full-time distance learning. When you select full-time distance learning for any elementary age student and for an immersion student, there's going to be a commitment on the part of those family members to support those younger students in a fully distance learning environment because they do not have that time to work directly face-to-face with a classroom teacher. So that's something we do. As people make those choices, there's going to be that. And that's some of the things that we'll probably in the next couple of weeks put out to the families that have selected full-time distance learning is, you know, with doing that, here's some expectations of how we need you to work with the teacher in a partnership with the teacher, with the child to ensure their success. So, because that is important, and that was a challenge. And so we do need to, as you said, we learned some things over the spring, particular in immersion, and how do we start that way. So I think that's been different than the hybrid model that most people are selecting a full model.
My commentary is, I'm less concerned about the people electing full-time distance learning because they're probably, you know,
Right.
more engaged, willing, or able to do those things. My concern is more in those that are electing the hybrid for
Right.
those 3 days when the kids are in school.
Yes, yeah. And I think so it'll be guided, kids will be guided even before they go home with what they should be doing at home. It's also part of the reason we selected a Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday instead of Monday, Tuesday, because then you're asking kids to go 3 days in a row without any connection with the teacher. This way the teacher can give them, here's what we want you to work on the next 2 days and we'll see you again Thursday. So there's things like that that were purposely selected with those days.
That's all I have. So, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mary?
Well, I just want to ramble a little bit. I think one thing about COVID-19 that it's laid bare a lot of our systems, healthcare and employment, just a variety of things. And I think it's important that we recognize that school systems are a lot more than just academia. Not too much has been discussed here tonight about social and emotional. But, you know, in a way, I'm sort of a dinosaur because I started my education experience in a one-room schoolhouse. And it's just amazing to me, especially when we have critics that come and talk to us that schools are spending too much. It's amazing to me how complex these systems are and how many moving pieces and how they all need to interact together. And I I think this is a good example of that, and I certainly want to thank all of these folks here who have worked incessantly on this, because, yes, pieces all do need to fall together, and it's not an easy task.
All right, anybody else? We'll turn around and see. Okay. Wow, that was incredibly helpful. Thank you for all of your time. Okay, sorry, I keep forgetting. Moving on to effective operations, improve our effective management of human, financial, and physical resources. Monthly financial report. Ms. Amy Schultz.
I don't know how you want me to do this, I can do it from back here since,
Whatever you want.
Maybe so that be sure they could pick you up on the.
Oh, yeah, so you
You
can
can do like
get-
Colleen and.
She doesn't want to.
I can talk loud.
Okay.
So we haven't done the financial report for a few months, so we had July off, so we're going back to May tonight to talk about the financials for that month. The first report is the treasurer's report. So again, this is cash basis. And one of the things with May is we do receive the first of 2 advance payments from the county for property taxes that are actually for the fiscal 21 school year. We get one in May, one in June. So of the receipts, 2.6 million relates to that. Much of the rest of it then is related to our meter payments from the state. One of the things you'll see as we get to the next couple of reports though is 2.6 million is a lot less than what we received last May. So a lot of districts have this where counties cut back on the amount that they were giving to the districts for these advance payments because of their own cash constraints again related to COVID. Last year in May we received 5 million, so this year was 2.6. They did make up for it in June, so we'll see that through the audit process. You can see one of the things that looks a little different than most years in the past for May is the negative balances for food service and community ed. Again, COVID, these were those 2 areas that we were required to continue providing meals and daycare. So we did continue to have the expenses even though we did not have all of the revenue coming in for those. So on the next slide, this is under statement of revenues. General fund, you can see we're pretty close to where we've been in the past years. Again, for all of these funds, when you look at general, community ed, debt service, and the OPEB debt service, all of these are behind a little bit where they've been in the past. These are the funds that we receive property taxes for, part of the revenue. So it does make sense then with the lesser payment coming in May that at this point they are a little bit behind where we've been in the past. So then looking on the expense side of that, we really are lining up with where we've been in the past. So that's the next slide. So again, general fund really lined up right where we've been. And that does make sense. Within the general fund, most of our expenses did not change at all, even through the strange spring that we had. Whereas food service and community service, you can see that those, they did stay higher. Food service was down a little bit. Some of that just comes from not serving as many meals, so we weren't purchasing as much food as well. But within community service, you can see we did continue to pay for the daycare providers, areas like that. Other funds are very similar to where they've been in the past. So with that, you guys have been through a lot of presentations. I will wrap that up unless you have any questions. And then I guess as a reminder, this is the last presentation for the fiscal 20 school year. We do not do one for June, as that is our fiscal year end, and you'll see those results through the audit process, which we usually make for aware of the results sometime in November.
Anybody have any questions? Tony?
Just a quick question, looking into the 2020-2021 school year. Do you foresee us having to take any action for any shortfalls in food service or community?
From the summer months, yes.
Okay.
I would guess that probably would. We haven't met to go over a lot of the COVID CARES funding relief. That won't come close to covering the shortfalls. So it is something that we'll continue to look at over the next couple of months. But I would say for those summer months, as the school year starts up, it will be, I will not be surprised if there are continue to be shortcomings for food service. We really don't know what that meal distribution will look like yet. It's not on site, and we'll start doing the things to support it. So we'll continue, that's one of the things we're continuing to look at for these schools.
Thanks.
Related to that, I think both the August and September work sessions, we'll be giving you more information about some of the budget implications with this plan. In order to make health and safety guidelines, there's obviously going to be some budget implications, and we'll walk you through all of those. So some of that you just have to be able to put in place in order to start school. So we'll be walking through all of that.
Anybody else? All right, thank you very much. Moving on to facilities update, Ms. Amy Schultz and Dr. Kirkland.
Well, I will, just briefly on this one, to be honest, we didn't take tons of time talking about this. What I wanted to do is at least just update you on where we're at with, what we should celebrate, like we talked about in June, when we were filling out kind of the year-end wrap for the district operational plan. I'd forgotten that we passed the levy in the fall because it seemed like so long ago, given everything that we had in the spring. Similarly, even now, it just seems like a long time ago, and it was just a month ago, that the Blaine City Council did approve the entrance. And that's thank you to a number of you who advocated with city council members about our plan, and I appreciate that. But we will be putting in the velodrome. The velodrome has come down. If you haven't seen that, that has come down. The NSC took that down, and we'll be constructing the road. So we'll provide more information for you on that. But that's really good news. We're going to eliminate that traffic that goes right next to the school on the south side of the school. So that will all be now diverted down to 103rd, and students will be able to enter the green space directly outside the school, which is going to be awesome. So I think that's a huge thing to celebrate, and we'll provide more information on that. And it already just driving by there looks nice just to be able to see the school and not see the velodrome coming from the south. So.
Do we have any idea what the timing is for completion of that?
Actually, so the bids went out for the project on Friday. So those are due to come back in a couple of, 3 weeks from now. So at that point, we'll have to discuss whether or not we can hold off on awarding bids until the September meeting, since it's a very late one in September this year. And some of it will depend on how the bids come in. They are hoping to start breaking ground in September, with wrapping up a lot of it this fall still, hoping the weather does cooperate for that. Obviously, landscaping, things like that would not be able to be done.
So that's the only thing with facilities update. Amy updated you at the June work session with just some of the projects, roofs, things like that. The happening as well has been pretty much maintenance this summer, which is the smallest summer of facilities work. But I will say one thing that, and this is a big thank you to our community for the bond referendums that they've passed in recent years, in the past since 2006. Tony spoke to the ventilation, just things like that. We are in a very unique position compared to most school districts across the state and the metro area, where we sit with having such updated systems in each of our schools. So that's our communities put us in position to do that. None of us did that in anticipation of a pandemic. So it's that's great to be able to have. So, but that's it. There's not a lot of other facilities updates like past summers that we've had to update you on and on this. We'll provide more information once we get closer to the actual construction. And then I don't have anything for the superintendent's report.
You do? Okay. All right.
Maybe listen to one.
We've heard it all. All right, moving on to action items. We'll start with acknowledgement of gifts. Is there a motion? So moved. Motion by Ms. Forsberg,
Second.
second by Easter. To adopt the following resolution, whereas School Board Policy 706 establishes guidelines for the acceptance of gifts to the district, and whereas Minnesota Statute 465.03 states that a school board may accept a gift of real or personal property by the adoption of a resolution approved by 2/3 of its members, therefore be it resolved that the School Board of Spring Lake Creek Schools accepts with appreciation the gifts as shown. A little bit of struggle getting that up there, so I just have we just have one gift for August. It is a donation of children's masks from Zopec Medical, LLC, for use of Spring Lake Creek students. So wonderful donation, incredibly timely, obviously, so thank you to them. Any other discussion? Okay, Clerk, can you call the roll, please?
Ms. Forsberg?
Yes.
Mr. Kroon?
Yes.
Mr. Strobel?
Yes.
Ms. Bowe?
Yes.
Mr. Easter?
Yes.
Ms. Wheaton, yes. Ms. Hennon?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
It was nice to do it in person.
Right.
Went a lot smoother.
We're not waiting 5 minutes for me to unmute. I know what you're all thinking.
Vote.
I was unmuting. I was. It's the faulty iPad someone gave me.
All right. Moving on to item F2, which is our added item, our addendum, the base learning model resolution. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr.
Second.
Searle, second by Ms. Wheaton, to adopt the following resolution. Whereas on March 13th, 2020, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz issued Emergency Executive Order 20-01, which declared a peacetime emergency in Minnesota in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And whereas on July 30th, 2020, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz issued Emergency Executive Order 20-82 and the Safe Learning Plan for 2020-2021, and authorized all school districts in the state of Minnesota to select and implement an appropriate base learning model in accordance with and subject to the Safe Learning Plan. And whereas the Minnesota Department of Education, MDE, has issued and may continue to issue written guidance for Minnesota schools on educational issues related to COVID-19, and whereas the Minnesota Department of Health, MDH, has issued and may continue to issue written guidance for Minnesota schools on public health issues related to COVID-19, and whereas the superintendent and the administration of the school district have conferred with the school board regarding the available learning models, the current MDE and MDH requirements for each, and other relevant information, and whereas based upon the collective consideration of these factors, the superintendent has recommended to the school board that the modified campus schedule / hybrid learning model be the base learning model to be implemented at the commencement of the 2020-2021 school year, acknowledging that ongoing review of health and safety conditions may require district-wide or school-based changes. Now therefore be it resolved by the School Board of Spring Lake Park School District 16 as follows. Section 1, the superintendent is hereby directed to implement the following base learning model to open the 2020-2021 school year, the modified campus schedule / hybrid. Section 2, the superintendent is hereby authorized, after consultation with the school board, to select and implement a different learning model for the school district or at a specific building if implementation is appropriate or necessary. In Section 3, the superintendent will provide regular updates to the school board regarding the school district's efforts to implement COVID-19 related education and public health guidance issued by the MDE and the MDH respectively. Any discussion? Yeah.
I'd just like to make a couple comments for anybody listening. Explaining my thought process on this. I know some of us have been contacted directly or at least indirectly from people that want us to just open and be distance learning. So I just wanted to explain my thought process and I'm going to vote the way I'm going to vote. I'm not going to get into any of the studies or any of that stuff. The bottom line is that this recommendation is following Minnesota Department of Education, Department of Health guidelines. My perspective on this is that we should be open as much as the law will allow us to be. I do understand, and that's why I really wanted to make it clear that even though we could technically right now opt for a more open model, and part of me really would want to do that, but I understand not changing models shortly into a first trimester of an already chaotic, not chaotic, but challenging school year. So I understand the basis for hybrid K-12, even though it's a little disappointing for me. And the reason I say that is that for four reasons. I think in-person learning, particularly at younger ages, is superior to distance learning. I know it's not the right choice for every family. That's great that we're allowing other families to make the choice for what's best for them. But I don't believe that we can replicate all of the benefits of in-person learning online. And this is particularly true in single-parent families or families where both parents work. Just cannot reproduce the same level of education online as you can in person. Second, we talk all the time about the achievement gap and what to do about the achievement gap. I can't think of anything worse to exacerbate the achievement gap than go to an all e-distance learning model. You read stories, I hope it's not true in Spring Lake Park, about a high percentage of some students in some districts not even logging on, period. I think it's really important to get kids in school for that reason. Third, mental health, emotional well-being, stress, anxiety, depression, all of those things seem to be exacerbated with the isolation that comes with e-distance learning. And then fourth is special needs, and I'm really glad to hear that we're making an effort to accommodate our students with special needs, even if that means to be in class more than the other students. And I'm really glad about the teachers, because that's an important part as well, that we seem to be managing that and making the necessary accommodations for teachers with underlying health concerns, so that's important. So, like I said, I'll be supporting the K-12 hybrid model, even though I wish we could open up more than that. I understand why we're not. I also, within the hybrid model, I wish we could have kids in elementary school in class more than 2 days a week. I understand the logistical challenges that we face, and I'm hopeful that maybe might be an adjustment to that as we go forward. I do have a lot of concerns with kind of how rigid this is going to be. I think a lot of parents have that concern about the social distancing, the masks, the kind of the limitation of human interaction. And I have concerns about that. I also have concerns to the speaker and open mic too, that we are going to lose some students to homeschooling private schools. For some families, this just isn't a choice. They can't provide distance learning. It just doesn't work for them. But I'm comfortable that we've done everything we can. The restrictions that I don't necessarily agree with are state mandates under the governor's executive order, and so there's not much we can do about that. So that's my explanation. I thought that was important to get on the record. So that's why I'll be supporting this resolution.
Anybody else want to speak? Comments?
I think it's important to note that, well, I agree with what Michael had said, that, you know, parents are asking to choose. We're giving them two options, but it's a choice that no parent wanted to make, right? So, and I appreciate the guidance that we're getting, and the district has worked really hard to maintain those levels within that guidance.
Thank you. Anybody else? John?
I just want to say, I think, again, the health and safety of staff and students is really at the core of this plan. I was really encouraged by it, and it's going to be the center point as well. And obviously, the learning's important. That's why we're all here. But there's just no giving on that piece of it, and I see that, and that's why I'm supportive as well.
Thank you. Anybody else? Sarah?
Yeah, I would just like to say I agree with everything, and I think that this plan is so comprehensive that even though it might not have every single part of, I mean, even to the extent of like how the classrooms will be cleaned and when they'll be cleaned, and how many times the students can expect to see their teachers when they're at home. I just think that everybody has gone above and beyond, especially what I've heard from other districts, just really gone above and beyond to try to make sure that every box is checked and everybody feels comfortable with what they're doing. But I also think as a teacher that, I'm in this same position this year, and it makes me want to do an even better job than I have the last, years of being 17 years or whatever of being a teacher. This is my 18th year starting, and I want to try even harder this year because I want the students to even feel like Michael just said, it's not the same experience. Totally not. It's not the same experience, and it's not awesome. But I know that the teachers here feel the same way I do, that I'm just going to try even harder. I'm just going to try even harder to be a better teacher and to do as good of a job as I can to engage my students, even though they're older, so that they feel like they're getting, we're all in a position, everybody's in a position of not getting what they want. And I think our students are resilient enough to go, this isn't awesome, but what can I learn from this? Tony and I were just talking about this in the hallway. What can I learn from this opportunity to grow and to be an advocate and say, I need help. My kids both need to do that more. They don't say they need help when they need to, and hopefully this will be an opportunity to say like, man, I'm not gonna see this teacher for 3 days. I better ask right now. Hey, I didn't really understand that instruction or whatever. So we can try to find the positive too, but I think this plan encompasses everything that we could want in a situation that we don't really want to be in. So.
Anyone else? I guess I just want to acknowledge, as you know, as our two speakers before our meeting showed, we have a lot of people who feel really strongly on both sides of this issue. And in that situation, and by we I mean the administration, because the school board hasn't had any work. we try and listen and provide governances when we can, but what we have to do in that situation is look at the factors that are in front of us, and most importantly, what's best for our kids, and the recommendations of the Minnesota Department of Health and Minnesota Department of Education, and really proud of the great work that you've all done to really get us to the best place we can be. So I guess I just want to throw that out there, because I know it's hard for the community, and we understand. So, anybody else? Don't?
Just real quick.
Yeah.
I would say, as I shared with others, I'm just amazed at the amount of work that's gone into creating this plan. Especially when everything is a moving target. You make a decision, 2 days later it changes. So as Sarah was saying, everybody's not getting what they want, but we're providing the best of what we can with what we have. And all I can do is reassure the residents, the students, parents, teachers, that we're doing the best we can with what we have. We're going to make sure that everybody stays safe, and we're going to continue to drive education. It's going to be uncomfortable. Wish we could control that better. But you know what? We're committed to the kids. We're committed to the students, the teachers, staff, and their safety and support.
All right, Marilyn, you're it. Come on, man.
And thank goodness, due to some great work that was done long before we ever heard of COVID-19, we are not cutting, and there are districts that are dealing with this and cutting. So, good planning a long time ago is really to our benefit at this point. So,
All right, anything else for the clerk calls the roll? All right, clerk, you're up.
Ms. Forsberg,
yes.
Mr. Crew,
Yes.
Mr. Strobel,
Yes.
Ms. Poe,
Yes.
Ms. Weekman, yes, Mr. Easter,
Yes.
Ms. Hennen.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. All right, moving on to board forum and reports. Does anybody have anything they want to share board forum wise? Amy?
Yeah. Well, were you ready, Marilyn?
Go for it.
I was just going to give an update from the Panther Foundation meeting. They had their first kickoff meeting of the year. And of course, as they're looking at planning events, everything is going to look a little bit different. But they did onboard 3 new board members this year. Colleen, I'm sorry, I forgot my notes. Amy Anderson, Janine Hansen, who are both parents. And then Niall Zickman is a community member. So 3 new board members this year. The carnival, unfortunately, has been canceled, but it is in the process of being reimagined of some sort of way to still engage some kind of community engagement. So as we've known the carnival in the last couple of years, that has been canceled, but everybody was willing to think about part of that that group, that Panther Foundation, and how wonderfully, incredibly supportive our community is, and how we can still engage as a group. So that's in a think tank right now.
Awesome. Ms. Forrester?
I listened to the first session of MSBA's summer session and had a lot to do with mental health. There's another session this Wednesday evening and the following Wednesday evening. 9/16 did a lot of routine business. It's a Zoom meeting, which is not easy with 14 people. And a a lot of routine business, and of course, they are struggling with their plans for this fall because 916 covers 4 counties. So that makes it even more complicated. But again, it is progressing.
Anybody else over here? I just wanted to mention, in addition to everything else going on, we did our annual superintendent evaluation, and just kind of wanted a public report that happened. We are all very happy with the work of our superintendent, and really appreciate all the work you do for us. So just wanted to kind of put that out there on the record. Anybody else? All right, we're going to move to adjournment. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Motion by Ms. Forsberg,
Second.
second by Ms. Wheaton. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Our meeting is